Hi, this is Lacey. I'm in Lisbon, Portugal at the Web Summit, and we agreed with Barney that we would share a few uh, video diaries with you guys. So this is my first time doing something like this, so bear with me as I figure out the kit. I'll show you the kit that I have in a second on my mobile phone, but also um, being as succinct as possible in one of these recordings. So the first topic I wanted to cover is a session that happened actually last night, and it was with um, uh, Frances Haugen, who's the Facebook whistleblower. So today's day two, but it's the first full day of sessions. There was the opening plenary last night. And so last night, Frances, from what I understand, was her first public address or public speech, sort of answered a few questions over about 20-25 minutes during the opening plenary. Yeah, so it was you know better than I expected. When I hear whistleblower, I tend to assume that everything's going to be overly dramatized. Even in some of the news articles that I've read about the session last night, a lot of the content was framed in a much more dramatic way than it was actually presented. I actually thought Frances was pretty cool. It'd be cool to be her friend. So she's very engineer. She's an engineer, absolutely. She's a data scientist, MBA. Her mother is a priest, so very clearly very intelligent, very structured in her thinking. Not particularly dramatic or sensational, and quite level-headed, sort of in evaluating things. So maybe first I just describe sort of what she shared and how she sort of framed the situation and why she decided to come forward as a whistleblower, and then maybe a few other topics that she touched on, and I'll try to make it as succinct as possible. So something that she described and she said is one of her motivations coming forward was to make more transparent the dynamics and incentives that lead and have led good, intelligent, conscientious people to make damaging decisions inside of Facebook. And so what she described was that it's sort of well established and understood inside of Facebook and other social media networks that the most effective and safe way to prioritize content in a news feed is to use a solution that combines two elements. So the first element is probably what we all think of, which would be engagement-based scoring. The thing that gets the most engagement goes to the top of the list. The problem is that often very charged, sometimes that mechanism is too effective in the sense that really charged content that can either, in some geographies lead to violence, riots, really like mass public movements gets prioritized at the top of the list. And also content that can be quite psychologically impactful goes to the top of the list. And so it's sort of been agreed long ago that combining that with what she called a safety system, so that was a new concept for me, but it's still a AI-based tool or technology that is used to filter the engagement-based feed that can come up. So it's essentially it's a safety system. It's a non-content solution that's used to filter a news feed. So non-content meaning it's not a censorship mechanism. It basically not based on certain keywords or filtering a certain political party or a certain viewpoint. It uses AI to filter engagement-based feed based on things that might be dangerous, basically, to society or to an individual. So I don't understand. I can easily understand an engagement-based scoring model. I don't understand sort of technologically how a safety system works, but the elements of it are that it's non-content, so non-censorship, and it's AI driven, so it's not a manual mechanism. However, it's also, from what she explained, and at least in its implementation in Facebook, is language based. And so it has to be modified and developed for each new geography, each new language that Facebook has rolled out into. And so the biggest sort of issue that she's had is that, again, it's agreed that these two things are important to have together to make both an effective but safe social media network. And in some markets, Facebook has decided to roll out their product with the engagement-based scoring model without the safety system. And it's often in some of the markets where maybe the safety system is especially important, where there may not be strong rule of law. There may already be some extreme social views against certain, pockets of society. But I mean, we see that in major markets as well, right? So, and the example she gave was in Ethiopia. There's Amharic, which is the dominant language, but then there's also 60 dialects, and that the safety system hasn't yet been adapted for that market. And so it has led to things like violence against minorities or women in public. And that really, we know that the social network combined with engagement-based scoring is very effective at getting people engaged, spending more and more time on the platform, and sort of, polarizing views and getting people move to action against those polarized views. And that Facebook has made decisions to, for example, grow into the metaverse was the example she gave, instead of making sure that the system that they have already is safe before they scale from like a two-dimensional world that may not be safe into a three-dimensional experience that will have some of the same architecture and elements behind it. So that was the main gist, and it was really helpful to kind of understand that. She explained it really well. And then sort of the second interesting topic that she brought up was around org structure and org design. And so she apparently she's worked at 2 or 3 other social networks. And the thing that she said is different about Facebook's org design, probably among other things, is that decisions about content safety and decisions about interacting with the political entities in some of the different geographies is made by the same person. And so when there is a decision that may need both viewpoints, the same person who is trying to keep some of the governments happy that Facebook interacts with is the same person who makes decisions about content safety. And so her point was that there's been a lot of solutions from the engineering teams to solve this issue and roll out a safety system in a more effective way. It wasn't clear if it would be language independent or if just more efficient than they're doing today. But basically, her point was there's a solution to this. We know how to do it. We could do it. But whenever that decision is put in front of some of the senior stakeholders to decide about resourcing, they sort of conveniently decide not to invest resources in making sure that Facebook is as safe as possible in all the markets that it decides to enter. So it was, very interesting, and I think the headline is that she thinks Mark Zuckerberg should step down. It was actually just a question she was asked directly at the end. She didn't sort of surface that on her own. She was pressured a few times to kind of answer the question, and she said, it's he has strong control of both the board and decisions inside of the company, and over and over the organization has chosen to focus only on growth without making sure that the product is safe. And it's if you imagine a 2D world that doesn't have some of these safety mechanisms in place, now becoming a three-dimensional world that may wrap around other parts of our life, that's a bit terrifying. So let's see, and I think that was it. So it was really, really a privilege to get to hear her speak, and to be in such a a cool environment, cool audience. It was really engaged in the content, and really where she could maybe go into some more of the technical thinking behind her coming forward with that audience. So yeah, very interesting, and looking forward to seeing the rest of her story.